Welcome, everybody, to a very solemn and serious episode of the Open Peace Podcast, which name kind of feels like a sick joke right now, considering the situation. We are currently seeing a escalation of violence with rocket attacks on Tel Aviv, threats of attacks as far north as my city of Haifa, a lynching of a Jewish man in Akko, airstrikes in the Gaza Strip, which led to the death of civilians because it's always in a densely populated center. At least last time I checked the statistics, at least 9 children have been killed in the Gaza Strip, which is atrocious.
Is it 9 or 10?
The last time I checked, it was 9 killed during an airstrike. A strike at some Hamas weapons depot. Jesus. Mm-hmm. It's unfucking acceptable. It's a very strange feeling because this happened so quickly and kind of blindsided, the public and the government.
And feels like it all happened in 2 weeks.
Literally. Yeah. like literally, it got so far so fast. I mean, and here's the thing, folks, is I just want to get this out of the way. I have been taking a break from the show because I'm currently in mourning. My grandfather passed away very recently, May 3rd. And even today, the thing that really brought me back was when a police officer knocked on my door asking me if any Arabs lived in my building. Today, the day of recording. And that's just unfucking acceptable. For a man in uniform, whether or not he was acting off of orders or if he was just some dude who thought the best interest of the city would be for him to keep tabs on our Arab neighbors, that's just unfucking acceptable. And I don't think my granddad, no matter how fucked my head is right now, would want me to waste my opportunity to denounce that kind of bullshit. Because that's just unacceptable. As a citizen, I am outraged. As a human being, I am appalled that a police officer would do that. All right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What would he do? If you had an Arabic neighbor, what would he do? I don't understand. Ask him questions, escalate him outside.
Well,
honestly, I don't know. I've probably asked him questions, asked to look around, try to search his house. I know police need a warrant, but I feel like in the current atmosphere, if a police officer went to a judge and just said, "I need a warrant to search this Arab's house," he would get it. And that's
maybe
that's just disappointing on a level that I don't think I've felt with this country since I moved here.
Well, I think we need to do a quick run through how we've reached this point, just so that it's clear where we're at. Obviously, the whole thing started with Sheikh Jarrah. I mean, that's it would be fair to say that it's the latest excuse rather than a real reason. At least as far as I'm concerned, the situation there is, I mean, though we need to be sensitive to everyone involved, it's pretty clear that, at the end of the 19th century, there was a small group of, I think it was actually mixed Sephardic and Ashkenazi Jews that bought an empty plot of land in Sheikh Jarrah legally.
It was obviously during the Ottoman Empire, by the way. That's how old this property dispute goes to.
Yeah. And then it was during the 50s, Jordan took the land. They managed to get control of the land illegally. And they built, how many homes is it? 28, right?
28 or 30, something around there. They built a whole neighborhood.
Around 30, for Palestinians to live in, obviously. And then when the 6-Day War happened in 67, obviously the area was annexed by Israel. We took it back to unify Jerusalem. And the original Jewish owners' families regained their ownership of it. And then I think years later, an Israel NGO bought the land, and most of the Palestinians that lived there decided to move away because they didn't want to stay. But there were 4 families that remained, and they didn't feel that they should have to pay rent. And they didn't for many years, actually. They went to court. There was lots of court proceedings, and then now they're facing eviction because they haven't paid the rent and they refuse to leave. And since then, there's been a lot of politicking and pandering to the different factions by the leadership to cause an uprising, riots. Depending on your narrative, obviously you'll have a different word for what it is. But obviously, yeah, there's the whole Palestinian elections thing that plays into it, and politicians trying to gain power. But the point is that it's led to a raid on Al-Aqsa, and then rockets being fired back and forth. And in some ways, it's a pretty unprecedented incident with the amount of rockets coming towards the center, right, guys?
Oh yeah,
it's
very unprecedented.
Yeah. We have Samaritans also living in Holon. Remember, just one thing, Amir was just saying. We the other part of the Samaritans are living in Holon, and it's the first time they get that that they are under some kind of really good danger for the first time. So things are really
Holon was hit pretty bad. Holon was hit pretty bad last night. Yeah,
I mean, with how bad
something else we need to be. Yeah, Tel Aviv area, but also if we look at Ashkelon, and the area of the south has been peppered with hundreds of rockets, guys. And of course, there's been responses to that in Gaza. Now, unfortunately, civilians on both sides, are losing their lives, while leaders are letting on both sides this continue. Now, it's actually slipping into complete and utter chaos and mayhem in the streets of Israel, since we have gangs of Arabs and gangs of Jews fighting each other and fighting the police and doing whatever in all these different cities like Lod, Bat Yam now, Tveria, Akko. There was trouble last night and tonight. So I really think, guys, that this focus of our podcast is opening the peace. We need to be the ones here telling the public to stop this, to get elders, to get the youngsters who are causing some of this mayhem to stop, to understand that violence is not going to solve any of our issues, of our long-term issues, and that we as civilians, as Israelis and Palestinians, deserve better and deserve a better future than cycles of this nonsense. And just so you guys out there are aware, we're in the first few days of this now. We literally have no idea when this is going to stop, when things are going to go back to normal, when rockets are going to stop falling. And all we can do is really hope and pressure the authorities to deal with the situation and not let things get out of control, because I've heard reports of there being a lynch in Bat Yam and another lynch in Akko, which are just unheard of things, guys. It's like we're going back to prehistoric times. What kind of these things, So we really need to look at ourselves, and we need to start making some changes.
Yeah,
I think just talking about you talking about, Amir, about when will this finish. I was at the barber a few hours ago, and one guy just mentioned that I don't think it's going to escalate so much anymore. He says that what's his name, Blinken, called Netanyahu. And I don't know if this is going to do anything, but
explain who that is, though. A lot of
it's just a guy in the barber who was just talked about.
Yeah,
you mean Blinken?
Blinken,
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
not the
Anthony Blinken is the new U.S. Secretary of State. He was put in, I believe he was I don't know, he served in a position under the Obama administration, and Biden brought him back to help clean up the Trump mess. I don't know what he can tell Netanyahu to do that would de-escalate, because Netanyahu's in a very politically weak position right now. Like, he's currently fighting to not go to jail, which requires him to like stay in power, and like the country's very fed up with him. He can't get a majority in the Knesset. We've been having back-to-back elections. And if he pulls back on his Mr. Security image, like that's the end of him.
That's his game, the Mr. Security image. But with the weak position,
anyway, guys.
We can't really hear you on there. I think you're cutting out a bit. I just wanted to pose the question. With the weak position that he is in, how much of what's been going on over the last few days on Israel's part do you say was Bibi?
I say with the amount of force that has been going on from the Israeli end in response, the level has definitely, increased, and I do believe that is because of Netanyahu and because of the position he's in. He is striking back with the military harder than we have in the past during like these rocket escalations.
Yeah.
Like,
that's the question. I mean, just to get on the record, I first of all, I think, the whole thing that happened at Al-Aqsa is incredibly unfortunate. And it was pretty obvious as soon as that happened that all hell was going to break loose, because there's no way that that's going to slide, especially considering things that have triggered stuff in the past. But the unfortunate truth of it is that people go straight back to their past behaviors, the way that they've tried to deal with stuff in the past, even though it's never had a history of being good for either side. Like, people say, Israel is the one in power, and sure, we are, but it's not fun for us either, and it would be much better for everyone, pretty much except far-right extremists, if this was not going on.
Exactly. They're the only ones that can see benefit from this.
Yeah.
Don't forget the media also, because when I was at the barber right now, a guy asked me, because he knows Samaritans are kind of like, a little bit also knows about the Israeli media, like we have access to Israeli media. So he asked if of what's the Israeli media saying, because they don't have access. So it's really interesting, because the Palestinian media has they focus really on totally different things than what the Israeli media does or like, let's say the same things, but from different narratives. And
of course,
crazy. And a lot of I don't know if you want to call it propaganda, but there are some different, basically the Palestinian media is just on fire right now. That's what I'm saying. Just as the Israeli media, but it's just think about how much that would affect the people's opinions and actions.
No doubt.
No
doubt. And it's very unnerving. Yeah, it is. It's unnerving to hear the way that people start speaking all of a sudden as well. Like, a lot of people have their extreme opinions, but the minute something like this happens, people start coming out of the woodwork. You hear calling for blood and hatred just spilling out of people that you wouldn't have expected it from. But it really needs to stop. There's just no way that a conflict ever solves our differences at all. Like, it's obvious. And what are we going to do? Fight for the next 1,000 years?
We also have to condone bad behavior. We also have to condone and stop bad behavior. So if there's people out there, regardless whether they're Jewish or whether they're Arab, we need to condemn it. We need to try and stop it. If people are out there throwing rocks and causing mayhem and throwing Molotov cocktails, that needs to be dealt with. And the same on the other side. If there's people out there causing distress to Arab citizens and burning cars and all this kind of behavior, that needs to stop. Any type of behavior that is damaging living on the land or to the land itself needs to be dealt with harshly, if you're asking me. And that's the problem that we're seeing here, is a lack of law, lack of law enforcement. You know, these things that were going on in the Israeli-Arab joint cities, if you like Lud and Ramla and Akko, we can't see these scenes going on in Israel, to be honest with you guys. It needs to be nipped in the bud. And I would suggest that it needs to be top down. You need to look at local peoples, local families, local tribes, get them to talk to the younger people that are out there causing some of this mayhem, get them to stop. And with regards to the rocket attacks, you know, I think you said it started in Sheikh Jarrah, Kane. I would argue that it started way before that, and that actually there's been, you know, terrorist attacks going on in the West Bank recently. In Tomet Tapua, you had a shooting.
Yeah, right near me. That I think that even happened before Sheikh Jarrah. You're right.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah, that happened way before Sheikh Jarrah.
Yeah,
and you
yeah,
know,
but I mean, to be fair though, those level of like attacks and actions, that level of violence is just kind of the hum in the background. You know, it wasn't until Sheikh Jarrah that we got to this point of where the IDF is getting involved.
That's where the
dominance. Yeah, I see what you're saying, but there was also these TikTok incidents, and this social media is fanning the flames of it, guys. We have to be aware of all the factors. I'm not saying that it's just one thing. I'm saying that it's a factor of everything. You have to factor in the terrorist attacks that are happening. You have to factor in the bad behavior happening on TikTok, the slapping of Jews on a train. You have to look at the fact that there's been synagogues burnt in Lud. You have to look at the fact that there's thousands of rockets flying around the sky. You have to look at all these facts. You have to look at the fact that there's dead children in Gaza, for goodness sakes, as well. You have to look at all these things, and you have to say that none of it is good. None of it is beneficial to our lives in the long run. And I really think that we need to look at ourselves, look at our own communities, empower ourselves to do better, because the Israelis and Palestinians together deserve way better than this, to be honest with you guys. And we have to be really aware of these scenes that we're seeing in Bat Yam, Lod, Akko. It's, you know, this is something unheard of for Israel, and also in the south as well, in Beersheba. So, you know, you really do have to make sure that things calm down and quickly, and we have to call on our communities to make that happen.
I mean, you hit the nail on the head, because especially because like these roaming gangs of vigilantes of both Jews and Arabs is not something we have seen since the British Mandate.
Oh, it's lunacy, man. It's absolute lunacy. What are people doing going out thinking, I know what I'll do today. I'll go and smash an Arab's head in, or I'll go smash a Jew's head in, because that's just the best way to deal with my grievances. It's absolute lunacy.
Of course. Is to fucking kill someone's child.
What decade are we living in where we're having lynch mobs tearing people apart in mixed cities where people live alongside each other peacefully all the time, all year round?
Yeah, for their whole lives. Yeah.
Their whole lives, and then they rip each other apart. It's ridiculous. And I would hope that at least it wouldn't be locals that did it. It would be people that showed up in Akko and decided to do that. Because if it's locals, then it's people literally turning on neighbors that they've known their whole lives.
Yeah, which is a really scary thought to me, especially because I live in Haifa, which is like the capital of mixed cities in this country. You know, like when people think of a Jewish Arab city, they think of Haifa.
Yeah, it's the first one that comes to mind mostly,
Yeah.
Living in this time right now, what's happening, it kind of blurs the fact that, you know, people have been living peacefully with each other, like, I mean, for a good amount of time right now, since the last war. So everything that's happening right now kind of blurs all of it, blurs all the hope that there might be. It's almost like, sadly, it kind of feels like we took a few steps back with this whole progress of less violence between the two nations.
One step forward, two steps back.
Yeah,
that's the story of this fucking country at this point, isn't it? It's like we finally think we think we're finally getting somewhere in like a level of normalcy, and then all of a sudden things start blowing up. Neighbors are turning on each other. We're turning into Bosnia.
Yeah.
Like that's what I feel right now. I feel like this country is becoming Bosnia 2.0. What's next? Fucking NATO strikes?
Yeah, wow. Yeah, I mean, let's hope it doesn't get to that stage, but it's bad enough. Like, look at the scale of this land that we're talking about. Look how small it is.
Tiny.
All of this lunacy is happening in a tiny, tiny space. I wasn't sure if that was you see what I'm saying? I wasn't sure if that was a bomb siren or an ambulance just now.
Yeah.
Like, at any minute, it can be either. It's crazy. People shouldn't have to live that way.
Not at all.
But,
and I mean,
real.
We can only, like us, me, Kane, and Amir, we can only really speak from the Israeli perspective. But I feel like we should also just take a quick second to just really say that, like, well, it's no way for us to live to be afraid of our neighbors or to be, like, constantly ready to fucking
I'm not talking about Israelis.
I know, but I mean, people are going to assume that we are, and I'm just trying to get it out of the way.
That's because people have their heads all twisted up. They don't understand the way the situation really is. They think everybody's just gonna, immediately. If they see the world through their lens, they're on that side and they're on that side. That's how they're gonna see it. But to be honest, that's not my problem. I know what I represent, and I've represented it strongly my whole life. So, people can misunderstand me all they want. There are people who are determined to misunderstand me, and I don't care. I'll say it clearly then. Nobody should have to live this way. Not us and not them. And there's no reason for it either. We don't have to live this way.
Yeah.
It's lunacy.
Yeah, that's...
because like what's the end goal of, let's say, the violence that's happening right now? Ultimately, people either want to, like they want peace in the end, right? They want to.
Well, they say
that's not the way. That's the idea that they don't get. Ultimately, both sides might cause. Forget the people who were brainwashed to do certain kind of operations. But like people just have to remove this idea of like how can we get my people peace? It's not by doing violence. And
of course.
Yeah. And you know what? It is worth mentioning though, Jared, that there are different sides to the situation. And we can only speak from the Israeli perspective, but I think it's fair to say that we haven't tried to just lay the blame on the Palestinians and just defend everything Israel's doing. We've tried to keep it neutral, but it is important to mention that there's also a massive cultural difference. I was reading something Corey posted earlier today. It wasn't his post, but he shared it. And it was saying, like, when you look at these lynch mobs, when you look at gangs of Arabs attacking Jewish guys in Jerusalem, to the Jew, it's like, oh, here's this gang of terrorists that are trying to tear me limb from limb, and they're firing rockets at us, and we have to defend ourselves. But from their perspective, because we don't look at it this way, in Israel, we don't blame groups for the actions of individuals so much, because we're quite splintered and fractured anyway. But the way that the Arab culture is that if you do something, if you go and blow up a mosque, then all the people who are part of your group are partly responsible for it too. It's a cultural difference that there is. Understand.
They're way more collectivist,
Yeah. So if they're attacking a Jewish guy, pulling him out of his car, to them, they're disciplining a member of the group that they're against. But to us, it's them attacking random innocents, because we don't think of ourselves only as like us and them. Many of us, at least.
Yeah. I feel like that level of
mentality, though. Yeah, sorry about that, Joe. But this is the thing: we're letting it slide to that it's us or them mentality now. When you're seeing lynch mob in the streets of places like Akko and Lud and Batyam, and you're really getting to that level. Now, personally, I think that you have to look. You really do have to look at local leaders, and you have to look at elders within the communities to get this stuff to stop. Because when I was watching the news earlier before hopping on the podcast, it seemed like a lot of these people are just misguided youths who are just out there causing absolute mayhem. And if we have a problem with misguided youths, that can be dealt with. But if we have a problem with misguided youths who are causing racial division between two sets of people that have been warring, for 100 years now, then that's a huge, huge problem. And that's what we're seeing at the moment.
It's when, like, the real issue with society is when we give these angry young men carte blanche to do whatever. Like, that's where the real issue is. And like in these flare-ups of violence, that's what happens. Angry young men get to do whatever. They get an excuse. They get a blanket excuse. Well, have you seen, like, why did you do this? Well, have you looked out the window? See what they're doing to us. And like that's an excuse for any bad behavior. It just feeds into the cycle.
Yeah, because if we wake up tomorrow and all of this would end, there's no guarantee it's not going to happen again. Just like how we kind of like, when was the last Gaza war, or even the last conflict happening? It was like 7-8 years ago, something like that.
Yeah, 2014. But don't forget that there's been plenty of rockets thrown at Israel since then as well. Guys, this is maybe the first taste of rockets that Central Israel has had. But people that are living down south and near around the Gaza border, they've been dealing with this literally now for 20 years. 20 years of their life has been in and out of bomb shelters, and this reality has to stop. It can't continue. This is not something that we can allow to continue. And we can't give the younger generation, the kids growing up today, show them that this is what responsible adults do, is lob missiles at each other, because they can't come to an agreement about land or about religion or about how to run a country. It's ridiculous, to be honest with you.
Ridiculous is exactly the right word.
One of the things that make me really nervous when we're in these kind of situations and this kind of violent situation is that when you're moving around, between two villages or countries or cities or something in here, so you can easily do something that can be suspicious unintentionally, just like 7 years ago with my story with the soldier. Just because he saw someone going out of a Palestinian taxi into an Israeli area, because of the current situation that was back then, people would just assume, oh, okay, look what's happening. He's probably going to do something. He's probably going to do some kind of operation. Boom, ran towards me with a gun. So this kind of affects the whole situation while you're moving around. That's why
you're right, dude. And that's why we as a podcast and as a team, we need to stand up against any type of violence, whether it be Jewish violence against Arabs or Arab violence against Jews. We just need to stand up against violence, period. And I think that's our duty, really, to do that as much as we can. I wanted to get from your perspective, Abood, how do you see this playing out? Can you see things calming down, or can you see an escalation on the horizon?
Yeah, well, it'll calm down eventually.
I'm sure it'll calm down eventually. It's just that the amount of suffering that's gonna happen.
Yeah, that'll happen. And I mean, like, at this point, I think it's gonna get worse before it gets better. We can only hope and pray that, like, that's not the case. That
but
this is as bad as it will get.
Yeah.
Because it can get into a domino effect. We don't want that.
Yeah. Go on, Abood. I actually really want to hear what you think, because I've not. What's your perspective been on it? You've been seeing the rockets, obviously, in the sky.
Oh, it's It's in the first time, I think, pretty sure it was the first time we ever see the rockets from the mountain here. I think it was above Tel Aviv. Some guy took some pictures of it. It's really unreal to see them. And it's been also like a little bit nerve-wracking for us for our other side as Samaritans, for our other side in Holon. I have like two aunts over there that are also describing the situation, because when you hear the sirens going on and the only thing you can do is just run into the shelter, that does give you this kind of pre-notion that you're in danger, and it can be pretty scary. Now here, living in the mountain right here, where we're in Mount Gerizim, we have don't forget that we have Israeli car license plate, so obviously we have to go, if we want to go to Israel or we're going to go buy anything from there, we have to cross the Palestinian village. And usually a lot of Samaritans, they want to show that, oh, okay, guys, we're also like part of the Palestinians, so just we want peace. So the way that they would like send this message out that, just chill out, is that they would put some kind of maybe Arabic songs or some specific Palestinian clothing that like they might put it on the car or something like that, because nothing guarantees you that if you go through that Arab village that some guy who might have this hatred towards Israelis in general might attack your car or something like that. You know what I mean? Especially in this time, in the last 10 20 years, I mean, for me that never happened. It did happen to some Samaritans that their cars got some stones thrown at. And maybe even vice versa, when extremists or Jewish extremists might see Samaritans and, they might see us speak Arabic or something like that. We might not feel, even though my first language is Arabic, I might not feel comfortable these days talking Arabic in some areas in Israel. You know what I mean? And we always say that we try to be a bridge of peace between the two nations, really. But at the same time, we kind of get crushed between the two nations.
You get crushed by both. You get ostracized by both, because you're like the black sheep of the family. You're not quite Jewish. You're not quite this. You're not quite that. You're not. I think it's ridiculous. Yeah. And to be honest with you, Aboud, I think maybe it's the perfect example that people can look at and be like, guys, we're all part of collectives, sure, but we're all individuals at the same time. Regardless, judge the person that's in front of you. Don't prejudge people before you've even spoken a word to them. And I think, Aboud, your community, you guys definitely can be a bridge for peace. You definitely can show the way forward, and more needs to be done for those kind of things to happen. And I think understanding and meeting up between different communities is vital. If Israel's going to succeed long term, we need to connect here between secular to ultra-Orthodox to Arab to Muslim to Christian to all these different religions and ideologies. We need to just connect people and understand that we all have a different kind of view about how things were created and who's the Messiah and what's this and what's that. But we're all human beings at the end of the day. We're all here to do our best, do what we can. And
you're right, Amir. I mean, I was me being at the barber like 3 or 4 hours ago. The barber he had this TV channel on the TV. By the looks of it, it was a pretty extremist, Palestinian extremist, or whatever you want to call it. I don't know if it was even a Hamas channel. I don't think it was a Hamas channel. But what I'm trying to say is that there was more than 4 to 5 songs that were out. Yeah, I know some people might not like me saying it, but it's obvious that it was kind of, how do you say, motivating people to do something, because that's what the song. It's songs that were motivating some people, and I think it's really dangerous. I'm not saying all the Palestinian channels are doing it, but that's what I've seen. I've seen songs, heroic songs, that if someone watches it, he might, kind of get that motivation and get like, that adrenaline. Like, oh yeah, I love that song. Let's do it. And that's super dangerous.
It is. It's crazy. and it's plenty fueled by religion. It's weird, and it's kind of counterintuitive to say it in the holiest country on earth, but we need to actually find a way to move past the religion. Put that aside, and not allow it to continue fueling this crazy conflict between people that are otherwise very similar.
It comes down to what we were talking about before, Kane, condoning bad behavior. Any Jew involved in a lynching of an Arab, that is terrible behavior. Any Arab involved in the lynching of a Jew, that is disgusting, despicable behavior. Put those people away. It's as simple as that. It's as simple.
But that's not happening because, like I said, people who do that with the way things are right now, with the current level of violence, they have carte blanche, and there's going to be an enormous section of society, both Jewish and Arab, that will defend those vigilantes.
Mm-hmm. But
they can be sure of that.
Carte blanche is, a large part of that responsibility is on the leadership shoulders, because they're the ones that give them carte blanche to do stuff like that. And
well, I mean, the leadership is benefiting from this, both Jewish and Palestinian, Israeli and Palestinian leadership. They're benefiting from this. There's an old idiom: wars are fought by young men for old men.
It's kind of true. It's kind of true.
The way I heard it was, war is young men killing and old men talking.
Yeah, there's going to be several different versions of it, but I mean, either way, it holds true. People our age are out there in the streets beating each other to death. For what?
Yeah.
So some schmuck in a suit in Jerusalem or in Ramallah can have a board meeting where he has a slightly stronger hand at the negotiations for whatever the fuck.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
I mean, crazy. It's kind of crazy, isn't it? To think that because Mahmoud Abbas told you to do something, it's a good idea.
And Hamas have made.
Apparently, we have something escalating. Oh, Amir got now.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think Israel and Hamas both have miscalculated with regards to this ongoing conflict. I think you mentioned it earlier, Kane, the mistake of going in there guns blazing into Al-Aqsa, that was a mistake. And Hamas even daring to fire rockets towards Jerusalem, that was a huge miscalculation on their side. Maybe they're not seeing it now. They think they're being seen as liberators of Al-Aqsa and all this, but actually in the long run it's only going to damage them big time.
Speaking of that,
we're liberators of Al-Aqsa by shooting rockets at it.
Speaking of Hamas and Israel, I mean, this has been half an hour ago, check this out. We have Hamas vows revenge after Israel kills top commander in Gaza airstrike.
Oh yeah.
Is that I don't know.
They blew up his house. Yeah. Which is usually what we're supposed to do. Israel's policy is usually supposed to be that we target military targets, and it's unfortunate and terrible that innocents. I don't actually know who the people were that have died, but how guilty can children be? You know what I mean? And maybe
exactly
they had bombs strapped to them or something. In those situations, extreme situations, it's you can understand, but.
Yeah, well, I mean that's part of Hamas strategy. Hamas does not. I just want to get this out of the way. Hamas, and I think it's fair to say that I speak for the entire group. Hamas is not a legitimate representative of Palestinians whatsoever.
Absolutely not. Absolutely.
They are not a representative. They do not care about Palestine. If you're a Palestinian and you're watching this, Hamas does not care about you. You are a tool for them to get money and power. You are nothing more than a tool for them to get recognition on the world stage. They do not care about you or your well-being. And that has always been their strategy. They deliberately put weapon caches and rocket sites in densely populated areas whether they be hospitals or schools or in the middle of like densely populated neighborhoods. That's where they put them because they know the Israeli army will have to attack them, and they know that the IAF will just take the risk that there will be civilian casualties and take out these targets. They specifically put Palestinians in danger, all because they want pictures that they can put out onto the internet to trick gullible Westerners into thinking, oh, it's all these Jews' fault.
Yeah,
They do not care about the Palestinians. You are nothing more than a tool for them to use. They do not care about you.
I was getting a lot of messages from the UK, and I was seeing that a lot of my friends back home are very confused by the situation that has just arisen over here. And I think, part of it is the misinformation that is out there regarding the conflict on both sides. There's two different narratives here. At the end of the day, we're going to have to come to some kind of conclusion with regards to each other's narratives, and we're going to have to settle on that both have committed, and have done some bad things over the past 100 years, and that takes responsibility, that takes guts, that takes a good hard look at yourself at some of the things that have happened here. And I'm sure if you talk to any rational Palestinian and you ask them if they thought that suicide bombings are a good idea, or that throwing rockets into civilian areas are a good idea, most will tell you no, it's not a good idea. And the same goes for Jews. If you said to them, do you think bombing now an apartment building in Gaza is a good idea or is a bad idea? I'm telling you, 99% will say it's not a good idea. And we need those types of views, people that are not radicalized, and the people that are radicalized, we need to do our best to get them to see the light and get them to understand that there's another way.
Yeah. I don't know if it would be 99%, but certainly a vast majority, yeah. Unfortunately, in this part of the world, the margins for the extremists are different. Like there's a higher percentage of extremists here than like if we're in England saying 99%, even more, 99.whatever% of Muslims are not gonna carry out a terrorist attack. Maybe here it's slightly lower, but it's still the vast majority. And I speak to people, I speak to Arabs, I speak to Jews. The vast majority of people do not want this to continue under any circumstances. It's like actually what you were saying before about Hamas, all the Palestinians know that too. Like the message you were giving them, Jarrah, really it's a message to the deluded Palestinians that genuinely think Hamas has their interests in mind, and the people outside of this region that don't understand it at all. Because most Palestinians know that full well, that Hamas has no interest in whether or not they're dead or alive. They've seen the evidence countless times.
What was that, Amir?
We have a really interesting question here by one of the viewers, and she basically says of Hamas are very predictable. Is there a different way Israel can respond other than the typical response of bombing back? And what do we think about that? So personally,
that's a good question.
It's a great question. It's a fantastic question. Thanks very much.
Very good question.
Question. I think there are things that we can be doing to maybe respond in a different way. How that response would be exactly, I'm not 100% sure, but it could be more measured and more strategical. So you could not contact straight away. You could wait a few days. You could target the people that you want to take out quickly. You can plan something long term. You can maybe see if there's anybody. Are there any leaders in Hamas that are willing to defect and maybe start a new party and start something fresh in Gaza and put the guns down? I don't know.
Well, I mean that's kind of what we do already. I mean, like my answer to the question would be to just use the Mossad way more than we are. whereas the Air Force is like throwing a rock into a pond, the Mossad is like throwing a needle.
What's the Mossad?
It's a scalpel.
The Mossad, the Israeli CIA.
Mossad. Okay.
Mossad. Yeah, I was just saying it with the accent. Yeah. But we kind of do that already. I mean, hell, there's a whole documentary out there. Like, what's the name of it? The Green Prince, of like the son of I think a Hamas operative from the West Bank.
Yeah,
a high-ranking Hamas member. Yeah, who was recruited. And I mean, the Mossad does that all the time. The difference is, I think the real issue with that is the government does not want to just use Mossad, because we don't see what Mossad's doing, because that's the whole point of Mossad. That's why it's so effective at what it does, because we don't know what's happening. A message, you mean?
Part of the way we approach it is we want to send a message.
It's about sending a message, and the Mossad's behind the curtains, and the government wants to send a message. Mossad doesn't send a message. Mossad gets results. Airstrikes, that's a message. Yeah, which is why, I don't know. I feel like there needs to be some level of separation, but that has to be more of a cultural thing. Between
I think it also
let me just
small
my
point
real quick.
Sure, go ahead.
All right. I was gonna say, I just think there needs to be more of a cultural separation in the minds of Israelis between what the government does and how the military responds to stuff. Because while those two things are connected, there's not going to be a single prime minister who's not going to retaliate as aggressively as possible and as visually as possible to a situation like this.
Yeah. I'd like Sarah's question about how should Israel, respond back. I really don't know, but what I do know is that it's really hard to balance between how fast we want things to de-escalate and what methods do we use, because if we want things to de-escalate really fast, they might think of those rockets, just kick back to Hamas as fast as possible, or some other method that might take longer but would be more effective and cause less violence. I mean, that's the thing. I think that would be challenging.
But that's an interesting. There's an angle to that that's interesting, because, like you say, Amir said it before. I think when you've got the government is just obviously trying. Oh no, sorry, Jared said it a minute ago.
Yeah,
the government obviously tries to make a message, to send a message, and they want people to understand that if you hit us, we're going to hit you back. But the problem with a sort of more long-term plan, even though, of course, we should make long-term plans, is that in the meantime, if we don't do anything publicly, then they might continue doing it thinking, oh, we can get away with this. They're not doing anything back. And in the meantime, people are still dying while we play out the long game. So there's that way that it could play out too. Or alternatively, by not retaliating immediately with full force, we might actually be able to minimize the casualties. It really depends how the Palestinians would respond to that kind of thing. But one thing I do want to ask you, Abood, is that maybe you've heard whispers from the Palestinian side of how do they think that we should respond to what they do? The ones that are reasonable and understand that this is a two-sided thing. Do you hear any suggestions from them on what they think we should be doing?
That's a good question. I really don't think I ever heard, but it just kind of makes me think, because if Hamas keeps launching those rockets and Israel would just how do you say in Arabic? We say mkataf al-yadayn, which means
fold their arms and just
fold their arms. Would Hamas keep doing those rockets? That's the question. And if Israel came back with how do you say, got back to them, would that just make things escalate more? So it's a really tricky thing. But I did to your particular question. I don't think someone told me that. Because it's just not as easy as the question sounds to answer. We don't know.
Yeah.
No, it isn't. Because Jared, you sent us a video on the group today of Trevor Noah giving his thoughts on this. And one of the things he was saying in that video was that he doesn't feel Israel needs to respond so heavy-handedly because we have the power.
Well, he was alluding to that,
That's what he meant.
He was alluding
trying to be more politically correct. He was basically saying, he was asking the question, does Israel need to respond with full force like that? First of all, it's definitely not full force, because if it was...
Oh, yeah, I was about to say, full force would be tanks rolling down the streets.
Exactly, yeah. It's not
this
that.
Is not full force, but it is pretty powerful.
We hear that kind of criticism and suggestion that Israel could be handling it with a lighter touch, but no one ever gives their idea of, well, what's a lighter touch in this situation?
Yeah, a lighter touch. I think the main issue about this, I wanted to talk with you more about this before, but I figured we'd save it for when we're on air, is I feel like the main issue overseas is that people who don't live in a conflict like this their whole lives, they honestly think it's a lot more simple than it is. Like, they understand that, like, it's a very complicated conflict, but, like, subconsciously they think it's simple, Because it's why you always get answers from Westerners that, like, oh, yeah, no, this whole conflict would stop if just one side just said, I'm not going to do this anymore. And, like, left-wing Westerners say, like, oh, if Israel just stopped, the Palestinians would leave them alone. And, right-wingers say, oh, well, if the Palestinians just stopped, the Israelis would leave them alone. But that's not how it works. That's not what would happen.
It's not how it works, Jared. Yeah. It's not how it works at all. But we need to push, and Palestinians need to push their representatives to build some type of roadmap towards some type of peace or reconciliation or something. Because, like you said, it's not going to happen overnight, and it's not going to happen, with anyone making one type of move or the other. It's about hashing it out and coming to some type of long-term arrangement that can let both people live fruitfully on the land. And, I hear there's not enough space. It's a tiny country. You can't have two people's groups living here on the same land. Well, hold on a minute.
That's bullshit. We can absolutely live here. There's not enough space. Well, guess what? We can build skyscrapers. Go up.
I think there's a lot of space. Yeah,
there's a lot of space. There's enough space. We have a whole huge desert, empty desert.
Plenty of space.
There is. I'll tell you something. What stunned me, even though I don't really understand, I don't know why it stunned me, to be honest. But what has stunned me the past couple of days is the people I've spoken to have been saying to me, well, why did they have to kick it back up again? Why did they have to start all this again? And I would say, obviously that's a great question, but people seem to be genuinely satisfied, on the Israeli side I'm talking, they're satisfied that when there's no rockets being fired, when there's no rockets being fired, that to them means the situation's resolved. And I can't seem to get it through to many of these people that, wait, you think that the way the situation is with undecided on whether we're doing one state, two state, federation, that when we still don't have an answer to that, people consider that resolved. And they genuinely do. People think that it's all fine as long as there are no rockets flying. And as proud as I am of Israel, I have to say, it's not fine for the Palestinians on that side. That even when it's all quiet, they're still not enjoying their lives like they would be able to if we actually came up with a solution.
I mean, you just remind me of a thing my granddad used to say before he passed. Is that where people learn as babies to have object permanence? That's just in case Abood doesn't know what that means. It's like, say, if I'm holding this lighter, I see it, it exists. But if I was a baby and I stop seeing the lighter no longer exists.
Right. That's why they do this and that.
like exactly the peekaboo, because like if you do that, the baby's brain isn't developed enough to understand. That is like, just because you can't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Like people learn as babies what object permanence means.
Yeah.
But we still haven't learned at what age when situational permanence kicks in.
Mm-hmm. Well,
because that's the thing. Like that's the thing with Israelis. Like we're in charge of managing this conflict. We are. We're in charge of it. Our soldiers patrol the West Bank. We patrol the borders of the Gaza Strip. We blockade it. We're in charge of managing it. But if it doesn't affect like the people on the Israeli side, like the Israeli civilians, it might as well not be happening, because it's not there. Meanwhile, when you go to the West Bank, you go to Nablus and our Palestinian friends there, they deal with it every day. It's not like Tel Aviv. It's like, yeah, they have some sense of normalcy, but they're the ones who see soldiers and checkpoints everywhere. They're the ones who see raids in the middle of the night. People in the Israeli side of the border don't do that. They don't see that. So like it might as well not exist. And people always forget that on this side of the green line. Once the violence dies down, like their lives as they are living them is not the lives people on the other side of the line are living. And people here keep forgetting that.
It's true.
Well, I think we
forget that because there's nothing to show them.
Yeah.
Yes.
They can't see that. Yeah, Amir?
Yeah, no, I was going to say we need to hold the people responsible for this endless cycle of violence accountable. And that would be our representatives and the representatives on the Palestinian side of both Hamas, Fatah, a lot of them. You know what I mean? These people sitting there at the top, taking salaries, getting paid to do this, to let this be the end of coronavirus. We've come out of the coronavirus. We've managed to somehow get through it. We're doing all right.
We're almost there. We're almost there.
We're almost there, and then boom. Both Israelis and Palestinians deserve 10 times better than what they're getting at the moment. And I think we really, really do need to push for new forms of governance, a new way of governing, and a way of doing things that is just different, because we cannot keep these endless cycles now. It's been 16, 17 years since we've been out of Gaza now. This is the nearly the fourth, we've had 3 wars. This is, could be the 4th war going into it.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. It's honestly, guys. And we need to do our best as civilians to push for an end to the violence and for an end to all this madness, to be honest.
Yeah. And guys, before we run out of time, I want to pose one quick question to discuss in a way you would fart in an elevator just before you get off. Should we just send the army in to reoccupy Gaza? Like fully?
No.
Remove Hamas and give it to Fatah. I mean, because I think we should put Fatah into power there, but I don't know how to do it. What's your guys' thoughts on that?
To you, Jared. I would say that's not up to you, Jared, and definitely reconquering Gaza.
You're breaking up, Amir. I can't understand.
I mean, we just said we heard you say. I don't think it's up to you, Jared.
Okay. Yeah. That's a fair point.
Whether you decide, I want Fatah there, I want Hamas here, it's up to the Palestinians to decide. You know what? If Hamas tomorrow decided that they were going to change their charter, that they were going to accept Israel, and that they were going to be a non-violent organization, I would say, ahlan wa sahlan, fadalu. Let's do it.
Absolutely, but they're ideologues. That's not going to happen anytime soon, and we need to get this resolved. No!
That's not good.
Yeah. Oh my God. Hamas just took out Amir. That's what happened.
Don't say that.
Yeah, I know I shouldn't. That's terrible. All right, so Amir's connection just yeeted itself. Sorry about that, folks. So, yeah, I mean, like, because that's just a question I wanted to ask before we go, guys. Because I don't know, I feel like as neighbors, we should support Palestinians and try to push them towards a more democratic direction. You know, in the same way where like you have your you have a neighbor, and your neighbor, like, you don't really talk with her all that much, but like she's a decent person and you like her. And then all of a sudden she has this boyfriend, and you see one day that the boyfriend's beating the shit out of her. Like, would you say something? Like, it's technically not your business and you don't really have a say in her love life, but you don't want her getting beat up either.
Yeah, but are you sure that if you're gonna go there, are you sure you're gonna fix things up or just add gas to the fire?
That's a very
the main question.
Point.
I know what you mean. Wow, I mean,
yeah,
it's just a question of whether you take a risk, and it seems, and like it seems like really dangerous.
You're right, though.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah,
it is, and there's no way forward anyway with the status quo, and the fact that we continue it is kind of ridiculous. But yeah, at the end of the day, ideologues rarely change their stance, so most likely it'll have to be the end of Hamas and a new dawn, something else before we ever get anywhere. Possibly even Fatah as well. But the current situation is horrific, and yeah, absolutely, we can speak for ourselves and Palestinians, not as in we can offer their perspective per se, but we can certainly support and hope for the best for them. It's the idea that we shouldn't be able to say anything that is in favor of any Palestinians because it makes us traitors. I mean, that's a ridiculous thought. It's human beings talking about other human beings that are suffering from really exactly the same situation that we are. And, you know, like, I'm not betraying anybody by saying that for Israelis and Palestinians, the only way forward is to reroute.
Yeah, I don't think it's betrayal. It's just that if you call it betrayal, it's like you're just calling
Many
it.
would.
Yeah, it's just because it's against your agenda. You might call it betrayal, and that
their agenda. Yeah. Exactly.
Hold on.
The agenda should be us being able to get back to some semblance of normalcy and coexistence, or not get back to, but you know, that should be the agenda, not we win and you lose. That kind of agenda never ends well.
Well, I mean, like that's an old, like a really old and debunked way of thinking of the world. It's old and obsolete. Like this, I know the zero-sum game, like that has not been how it exists. But we have one thing here from a viewer, Yehuda Hodges, who's been commenting a lot. I just saw it now. Here's a good question for you guys: is an election good if it puts Hamas in power?
We're talking about Palestinians?
It's a great question.
Yeah, a Palestinian. Yeah, he's talking about Palestinians. Like, I mean, like that's a good thing. I mean, I would argue just off of my personal political beliefs that elections are always good. I would just argue that that's how it is. I mean, like.
Yeah, in a democracy that actually functions as a democracy, but
exactly. But
if we want to take it seriously, and if we want to take ourselves seriously, we have to be honest. It's not a democracy over there. They're not all voting.
Of course, but I mean, it's also kind of like just as a comparison, Germany in the 1930s, before Hitler came to power, was a democracy, and Hitler came to power through a democratic election. Germany was a democracy beforehand.
Yeah.
So I mean, like it's a very difficult thing.
It's pretty different than the Germany situation.
Of course. I'm just giving an example. You know, food for thought for our guests. We'll just because we're gonna leave. Because unfortunately, viewers, we're gonna have to leave you guys with that little nugget to think about amongst yourselves. Because we are out of time, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And, Nazi Party was banned and came to power after the ban was lifted. Yeah.
So, just to say to Jordan, you asked a couple of questions there during the podcast there, Jordan, and we didn't really get around to answering you. But tune in another time, and we will absolutely try and talk to you. But yeah, for today, we better get the hell out of here.
Wrap it up. Thanks everyone for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. Follow us on Patreon and Instagram. It was really a pleasure tonight, and it's just the beginning of the Open Peace podcast.
Yeah,
subscribe.
Only episode 24. Exactly. Do it, Jordan. I see you. You better subscribe.
Subscribe and get a free tahini.
Yeah, you get a free tahini. Yeah, if you are a subscriber and you go to Hargerizim, Abood will give you free tahini.
Yeah,
that was an accidental promotion.
Yeah, the accidental promotion every episode. But guys, you know what? You know what else has happened? It's been forever since last I did this.
Oh yeah,
the thunderstrike of right.
Satisfied? Are you satisfied, Jared?
I am. I mean,